On our anniversary, I called Anna, again and again. No surprise, she didn't answer. The house was dark. The only thing that caught the light were a few scattered photographs on the coffee table. In those photos, my girl was kissing another man, shamelessly, passionately. His hand was wrapped around her waist like he belonged there. So it was Henry. I still remember the way he looked at me back then, smug, condescending, and said, "So what if you met her first? So what if you loved her for years? When you love her the most, she cannot resist the temptation of the world." When he said this, it was the first time I saw him being intimate with Anna. In a shopping mall, she was choosing a watch for him. Over the years, Anna had been to countless galas, parties, charity dinners, her plus ones always changed. But Henry? He was the only one who stayed. I pretended not to see the way their fingers intertwined, pretended not to notice the faint mark on her neck just beneath her collar. I was a coward. I couldn't face them, didn't dare demand an explanation. It'll pass, I kept telling myself. She'll come back. Because no one knew how deeply she loved me, more than I did. Anna had grown up in privilege. Her parents were political powerhouses, there is also a brother who dotes on her. She was born into a world I could never touch. But this golden girl, this spoiled, headstrong princess, turned her back on all of that for me. She defied her family, walked away from their approval, endured whispers and judgment just to be with me. People used to say I was a gold digger, that I'd used the Collins family name to climb the social ladder. And when she heard that, she snapped a guy's arm in two for daring to say it. She never let anyone insult me. Even at her most prideful, that princess of mine would swallow her ego and coax me gently whenever we fought. That's why I turned a blind eye. I said nothing when she started sleeping around. I said nothing when she took Henry on business trips. I said nothing, absolutely nothing, when she secretly spent Christmas with him while lying to my face. But tonight, as I held a thin slip of paper, a cancer diagnosis, cold and clinical, I suddenly realized I didn't want to keep swallowing this anymore. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, waiting through most of the night. It was nearly dawn when Anna finally came home. She walked in like she always did, calm, effortless, and slipped behind me without hesitation, wrapping her arms around my waist from behind. "Do you know what day it is?" I asked, my voice carrying a faint tremor I didn't want her to hear. "Sorry, George." "Something came up," she murmured, pressing a kiss to my shoulder. "Your gift's ready, my assistant already had it delivered." Still sweet. Still soft. But once upon a time, she would have planned every detail herself, my birthday, our anniversary, whatever the occasion, down to the smallest ribbon. "George, do you like this one? You look amazing in this, George, seriously, so handsome." My George deserves the best. Only the best. Nothing less. I remembered a college date, she was late by just half an hour because of some campus event. She came running, breathless, eyes full of apology. "I'm so sorry, George. I didn't mean to make you wait this long." Back then, I was fragile, always falling sick. In the dead of winter, she wouldn't even bring a scarf, just stood there with her face pale from the cold, warming my hands with her breath like it was the only thing that mattered. And now? Now, Anna still apologized, but her voice was distant, mechanical, like she was ticking a box. Nothing sincere about it. I placed my hand over hers, and my heart skipped a beat. That spot on her finger was bare. "Where's your ring?" I asked quietly, my fingers tightening around hers. "Where's your ring, Anna?" "Our rings, hand-engraved, made with love. I'd carved them myself. We had them made in Paris, in the middle of a snowstorm. We were mugged that day, and even with a knife pressed to my throat, I'd clutched that ring like it was life itself. And now it was just gone." Right then, her phone buzzed. I caught a glimpse of the caller ID before she could hide it. Henry. My blood went cold. I grabbed the phone and hurled it across the room, my voice cracking with fury. "Don't answer that." She froze, shocked by the sudden outburst. Then, slowly, her eyes darkened with irritation. "It's just a ring," she snapped. "If it's gone, I'll buy another one." Gone, and just buy another? If the ring could be replaced so easily, what about the person who gave it to you? I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Anna," I said, my voice steady this time, "I want a divorce." The word divorce seemed to shake her to her core. She stared at me like she hadn't heard me right. "Say that again." And it made sense. After all these years, through every fight, every silence, we'd never once talked about ending things. I said nothing. I just looked at her, and for the first time in a very long time, I saw her clearly. Anna's eyes turned red in an instant. And just like always, when she got hurt, she struck back harder. "Oh, you want a divorce?" she snapped. "George, what makes you think you even have the right to say that? George, what do you think you are good for? I've had enough of you over the years. You'd better not regret this." And with that, she slammed the door behind her. "I've had enough of you. George, I've had enough of you." I sank slowly to the floor, her words echoing in my mind on a relentless loop, each one sharper than the last. That woman knew exactly where to hit, didn't she? She didn't raise her voice, but her words cut deeper than any scream ever could. My chest ached with a dull, pulsing pain. 1,000 tiny needles beneath my ribs. The truth was, Anna had always had a temper. Even back when we first started dating, my friends had warned me. "George, girls like her, they're just in it for the thrill. When they love you, they'll hold you like you're the center of their world. But the second that love fades, the mask comes off. No one stays the same forever." Turns out, we weren't the exception. My stomach twisted in pain. I curled up on the hardwood floor, too weak to stand, too tired to care. Eventually, I drifted off, half conscious, half curled around my own misery. In my dream, I saw the old Anna. The one from years ago. She was standing beneath a cherry blossom tree, her cheeks flushed, eyes bright with hope as she confessed to me. "George. George, let's be together, okay? I'll take good care of you. You're the only one I like." She clung to my arm, looking up at me with that fierce, innocent sincerity, so full of fire, so full of promise. "Liar," I thought bitterly, even in sleep. "Before long, you won't even bother coming home." At some point, a tear slipped silently down my cheek, hot, bitter, and stubborn, refusing to fall unnoticed. I didn't sleep well at all. The shrill ring of my phone pulled me out of a restless, feverish haze. By the time I opened my eyes, it was already past noon. My head was heavy, my body aching, probably a cold, I guessed. On the other end of the line, my attending physician urged me to check into the hospital for treatment as soon as possible. I stared at the ceiling. I'd watched my parents, one after another, slip away in those sterile white rooms. I'd seen too many people the hospital couldn't save. I politely declined his offer again and decided I'd just swing by to pick up the medication myself. While I waited in line at the pharmacy, a voice behind me called out, surprised, uncertain. "George?" I turned around. Selina. I hadn't seen her since college graduation. Or more accurately, since I started dating Anna. That was when all contact between us stopped. Anna could be possessive. Fiercely so, in some ways. She never liked any lingering connections to my past, especially not with someone like Selina. Selina's eyes dropped to the prescription slip in my hand. Her brow furrowed. "George, you don't look well." We ended up sitting in the hallway outside the hospital clinic for most of the afternoon. That's when I found out my doctor, my attending physician, was her uncle. And that Selina had only recently returned to the country. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of orange and crimson, she insisted on driving me home. Neither of us said much during the ride. The silence stretched, heavy and awkward, but neither of us rushed to fill it. Just as we were approaching my neighborhood, she finally spoke. "George, sometimes I wonder if I should have fought harder back then." We both knew what she meant. There was no need to say it out loud. But I kept my head down, silent. I didn't have the energy to go back there, not even in conversation. When we pulled up to the house, I reached for my keys, bracing myself for another empty evening. But when I stepped inside, I froze. Anna was there. After the way we tore into each other last night, I didn't expect to see her again anytime soon. I thought she'd disappear for days, maybe weeks. But there she was, calm, unreadable, waiting in the living room. Before I could say a word, Anna stormed toward me, her face dark with suspicion. "Who was that?" she demanded. My grip tightened around the pharmacy bag. She didn't ask where I'd been. Didn't notice the medicine in my hand. Didn't care why I looked like hell. All she saw was someone dropping me off, and all she felt was jealousy. "A friend," I replied, flatly. "What kind of friend?" she snapped, grabbing my arm and refusing to let it go. "What friend, George? Why don't I know about this one?" "Selina." I said it without emotion, tired of the performance, tired of pretending anything still mattered. You know her. Selena had been a classmate. We were in the same student organization back in college, so we saw each other often. Over time, she started to develop feelings for me, feelings I never acted on. But even that was enough for Anna to hate her. Just the mention of her name used to be enough to start a war. And now was no exception. Anna took a step back, nodding slowly, her expression turning razor sharp. Of course. I knew it. I knew something was going on the moment you said you wanted a divorce. It's her, isn't it? She stepped closer again, her smile curling with cruelty. So tell me, when did it start? When did you two finally hook up? That one landed like a slap. I stared at her, my voice colder than it had ever been. That's enough. Don't insult people like that. Insult? She laughed bitterly, eyes wet with fury. You think I'm insulting you? Oh come on, George. Anyone with half a brain could see the way she looks at you. Her voice cracked, somewhere between a sob and a scream. And to think, I actually felt guilty about last night. I came home to apologize. But what do I find? College wasn't enough? You two had unfinished business all this time. And now that you're divorcing me, she's conveniently back in the picture. Well damn, George. I had no idea you were such a catch. I wanted to slap her. My vision blurred with rage, my legs barely holding me upright. And what about you? I snapped. What gives you the right to judge me? I pulled out the photos and flung them at her feet. You want to talk about betrayal? You want to talk about trust? Look at these. I hadn't planned to do this. I really hadn't wanted it to end this way. After everything we'd shared, I thought, maybe, we could walk away with a little dignity. But now? Now it all felt like a farce. Anna's eyes flickered with panic. Maybe she finally saw how far she'd pushed me. I'm sorry, George, she said quickly, stepping forward, her voice trembling. I didn't mean what I said, I was just angry. She wrapped her arms around me, trying to pull me back into the safety of routine, of habit. You know how I am. I don't like you getting close to other people, it just drives me crazy. The photos crumpled beneath her heel as she softened her tone, her voice going syrupy sweet. I'll change. I won't mess around anymore, I promise. George, I only want you. We don't need to divorce. Let's not do this, please. And then, like the punchline to a bitter joke, she added, just don't be with Selena, okay? That actually made me laugh. Even now, all she cared about was claiming ownership, not love. Not truth. Just possession. She still didn't get it. She couldn't see where it had all gone wrong. But honestly, what was the point of arguing anymore? I didn't have much time left anyway. I gently pried her fingers off me, one by one. Don't worry, I said quietly. I won't be with her. But we're still getting divorced. After all, didn't you say you'd had enough of me a long time ago? No, George, no, she shook her head, desperation rising in her voice. I didn't mean that. I didn't mean any of it. I was just angry, I was talking nonsense. Please don't do this, she pleaded, clinging to me again. Stop fighting me, okay? Anna rose on her toes and pressed a kiss to my lips. George, I know you could never really let me go. Let's stop fighting, okay? Let's just go back to how things were. George, my George. I love you. Let's start over. You. But all I could think about was how many other people those lips had kissed. The thought made my stomach turn. She held on to me tightly, refusing to let me pull away. Her kiss deepened, slow and deliberate, laced with forced tenderness and a pathetic sort of pleading. We've been together for so long, she murmured against my mouth. You're really just going to throw all of that away? I scoffed. God, she really thought she was that unforgettable. It was just 10 years. My original plan had been simple. Once things were finally over with Anna, I'd head south, maybe to a quiet island where winters weren't so brutally cold. With a little luck, I might even get to see the flowers bloom next spring. But of course, Anna wouldn't allow that. She started carrying razor blades with her everywhere, threatening that if I walked out, she'd kill herself. She took my passport. My ID. Everything that could get me out of this house. We had completely fallen apart. Our relationship unraveled faster than I ever thought possible. But strangely, there were no more screaming matches, just a heavy, suffocating silence. The space between us grew colder by the day. And my body, it was giving out. I could barely eat anymore. I couldn't eat all day long, and if I finally managed to eat a little, I would vomit it all out. I was shrinking into myself, fading. She saw it, she saw the changes in my body and also saw the bloodstains by the sink. But in her mind, all of it was just another form of protest. A silent rebellion against her. Late at night, she'd crawl into bed and cling to me like she was afraid I'd vanish. "George," she'd whisper over and over again in the dark, "please don't hurt yourself like this, it breaks my heart." But I wasn't hurting myself. And I was trapped, caged in this house, in this dying body, in this life with no dignity left. That kind of life dragged on for about a month. Then, Selena invited me to a gallery exhibition. I deliberately chose the day Anna would be out of town on a business trip. When I walked her downstairs that morning, she looked at me strangely, like she could sense something wasn't right. It made me uneasy. I was afraid she'd picked up on my plan. Because truth be told, the art exhibit was just a cover. What I really intended to do, was leave. Selena and I had arranged everything in advance, she'd drive us out of town. With my health deteriorating, I couldn't handle a long drive on my own, so she agreed to take me the whole way. We'd made the plan 3 days earlier. She didn't ask for details. Didn't press for explanations. She just nodded and said, "Okay." That was all. On the road, somewhere past the city limits, she glanced over with a teasing smile. "We could still stop by that exhibit, you know. It is your favorite artist, after all." She wore a denim jacket, high-waisted jeans, her ponytail pulled tight and high, clean, confident, striking. Exactly like the girl I first met years ago. She hadn't changed one bit. And all of a sudden, I felt a sharp pang of guilt. I owed this woman more than I could ever repay. We'd both studied fine arts. Back in college, we used to visit galleries together, big names, small local shows, anything we could find. We even made a promise once, to study abroad together in Italy, to keep chasing the dream side by side. But then came Anna. And I gave up painting. I gave up everything. I still remember the day Selena got her offer letter from a prestigious art institute overseas. She came running to tell me, eyes bright with excitement. And I crushed it in one breath. Told her I wasn't going anymore. I didn't even give her a reason. Just left her standing there, dream in hand, and no explanation at all. She had stood there, frozen, for a long time. I thought she'd explode, thought the anger, the betrayal, would finally break through. I was ready for it. Braced for the storm. But all she said was, "George, if that's your decision, I respect it." No fury. No tears. No drama. Just quiet acceptance, graceful, unconditional, without asking for a single explanation. Just like now. Selena glanced at me in the rearview mirror, smiling softly. "Let's go see it," she said. "Call it a proper goodbye to the past." In the end, we went to the exhibit. Selena led me straight to the main gallery hall and stopped in front of a painting I knew all too well, one of the most iconic pieces from my favorite artist. She pointed at it and smiled. "Remember this one? You once told me you'd make a name for yourself, just like him." In the painting, a man sat alone atop a high platform, gazing into the distance, silent, composed, solitary. Make a name for yourself. The words hit harder than I expected. Selena's voice had casually brought it back, but it ripped open an old wound I thought I'd buried years ago. Of course I remembered. Back then, I was determined to marry Anna. I thought if I worked hard enough, if I achieved enough, I could prove myself worthy of her, and her family's world. I pushed myself relentlessly. I wanted to succeed. I wanted to show the Collins family that I could give Anna the life she deserved, without their money or influence. But I was naive. The gap between us was too vast. All that effort, everything I'd built, was torn apart the moment her family decided I wasn't good enough. They had someone else take my spot in the international art program I'd earned. They pulled strings that affected even my parents' jobs. My artwork was blacklisted, my name quietly erased from gallery rosters, and no one in the industry dared to work with me again. All it took was a flick of the Collins family's wrist to dismantle everything I'd fought for. Anna's older brother came to our door himself. He didn't threaten me directly, but every word he said was filled with contempt and the kind of condescending attitude that only rich people can have. My parents were proud people. They couldn't stand the constant insinuations, that I was just another social climber, chasing status and power through Anna. So they gave me an ultimatum: end it with her, or they'd cut me off completely. Back then, Anna nearly broke her leg trying to sneak out to see me. In our darkest moments, we held each other on empty streets in Manhattan, shivering at dawn. She clung to me, voice thick with tears. "George, we can't give in. Promise me you won't. We only have each other now. We never walk away. Ever." And now, standing in front of that painting, I slowly slipped the ring off my finger. My chest tightened, my body curling slightly under the weight of it all. We had survived so much. We had fought for this love when the whole world was against us. So how did we still end up like this? Right then, my phone started ringing. It was Anna. She had realized I was gone, much sooner than I'd expected. By the time we stepped outside the exhibit, the sky had opened up. Rain poured down in thick sheets, blurring everything in sight. The car sped past. My phone kept vibrating non-stop in my pocket. Missed call after missed call, over a dozen, all from Anna. I ignored them. The heavier the rain fell, the more the city faded behind the downpour, like it was slowly washing itself clean of everything I'd lived through here. Then I got a text, from Anna's best friend. "George, please just answer her call." I hesitated. A part of me thought, what if something actually happened? And if it had, the Collins family wouldn't hesitate to come after us. I could deal with whatever came my way, but I didn't want Selena caught in the fallout. So after a long pause, I finally picked up. There was chaos on the other end of the line, music pounding, people laughing, glass clinking against glass. She was at a bar. "George," a woman's voice came through the phone. "Anna's drunk. She's been crying all night at the bar, saying you don't want her anymore." I'm handing her the phone. "You should hear this for yourself." The next moment, Anna's voice blasted through the receiver, loud and raw with heartbreak. "He doesn't want me anymore. He doesn't want me." Someone nearby whistled mockingly. "Damn, who's the guy that dared break Anna's heart? Tell us, we'll go teach him a lesson." Then came a familiar voice, Henry's. "Must be Anna's boyfriend," he said with a smug laugh. "Real temper on that one. No idea what she sees in him." There was a pause, just long enough to feel the tension shift. Then chaos erupted. A crash. Furniture overturning. Shouts, bodies moving. "Anna," her friend screamed. "George, you have to come now, Anna's lost it." Selena and I rushed to the bar. From outside, we could already hear the commotion. The place was a wreck, glass everywhere, chairs overturned, and voices rising in a wild storm of noise. But cutting through it all, was Anna's voice. "You think you're even worthy of being compared to my George?" She was furious, completely unhinged, swinging an empty beer bottle with a rage I'd never seen in her before. Her eyes burned, her body trembling with fury. "You sent him those photos? You thought you could just scare him off and take his place? You think that makes you someone?" With a crack, the bottle came down hard on Henry's head. Blood poured down his shoulder. He didn't even fight back, just dropped to his knees in front of her like he'd already accepted his punishment. People scattered, shouting, trying to pull her away. Someone in the crowd spotted me and yelled, "George." Everything went still. Anna froze in place, her grip loosening, her breathing shallow. The entire bar, just moments ago vibrating with chaos, fell into a stunned silence. She turned slowly, still holding the shattered bottle in her hand. Blood trickled down her arm from a long gash, seeping into her sleeve. "George," she called out softly, like a child who'd just realized they'd gone too far. Relief rippled through the crowd. One of the bystanders clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Thank God you showed up. When Anna loses it, there's no one else who can get through to her." I let out a tired sigh and helped her toward the back to get the wound cleaned up. In the small exam room, she sat there quietly, the same woman who used to cry over a paper cut, now completely still, docile. "You were leaving, weren't you?" she asked, her eyes locked onto mine, voice hoarse and low. "I wasn't on a business trip. I knew you were with Selena. You're done with me, aren't you? You really don't want me anymore?" The room fell silent. And then I heard it, the quiet, broken sound of her crying. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small box, gently opening it in front of me. "The ring," she whispered. "I found it. I got it back. I've cut ties with everyone else. Except you." Her voice cracked. "Please, don't leave with her. Don't walk away from me. Just one more chance, George. Please, I mean it this time. I really do. That was her, always. She knew how to sound fragile, how to look just broken enough to pull at your heartstrings. And when you gave in, when you softened, she'd go right back to who she was before. But this time, it didn't work. Because the part of me that used to ache for her, the part that once couldn't bear to let her go, it was gone. I took the ring from her trembling hands and set it next to mine. Then, without hesitation, I tossed them both in the trash. It's too late, I said. Anna, I said flatly, meeting her eyes. Listen to me carefully, I don't love you anymore. And I don't care about you anymore. Those 10 years we had? I might as well have handed them to a damn dog. Her smile froze at the corners of her lips. Then, slowly, her gaze drifted toward Selina. She lowered her head, playing the innocent again, sweet, quiet, demure. And that's when the unease surged in my chest. Because I knew Anna better than anyone. She is not only violent, but also dangerous. She is the princess of the richest family on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, with powerful family and brothers behind her, and she will clean up the mess she leaves behind. Anyone who messes with her will pay the price, usually cruelly. She never forgave. And she never forgot. 4 years ago, I'd seen it firsthand. Back then, she had that same soft, obedient look on her face, just before she destroyed another woman's life. That woman had undercut her in a real estate deal. Nothing huge, just some quiet sabotage behind the scenes. Anna found out and invited her to dinner, smiling the whole time. But before anyone realized what was happening, a freshly served dish, boiling hot, was dumped right onto the woman's face. Anna didn't even blink. While the woman screamed and writhed on the floor, clutching her scalded skin, Anna calmly wiped her hands with a napkin. Then she said, in a voice cold enough to make the entire table go silent, "If you touch what's mine, you don't get to walk away whole." That incident made it very clear to everyone, when the Collins heiress takes revenge, she doesn't stop at warning shots. That's why I had cut off contact with Selina in the first place. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. I didn't want her hurt. And I knew Anna was capable of anything. Ever since she first heard Selina's name from me, I'd seen her shadowing her. Subtle, calculated, but unmistakable. She was watching her. Studying her. Now, standing in that cramped room, Anna looked right at me and gave a bitter, knowing smile. "You care about her that much?" she said quietly. Then she began wrapping another layer of gauze around her wrist, tightening it slowly, lips pressed into a sharp line. "Then you should understand, George. I can't bear to part with you and can't do anything to you, but that doesn't mean I can't touch Selina." My eyes turned cold in an instant. "If you lay a finger on her, Anna, I swear, I won't let you walk away from it." Outside, the rain poured harder, tapping furiously against the windows. I pulled the diagnosis report from my coat pocket and laid it down in front of her. "Anna. I don't have much time left. Call it a favor, or a final plea, just let me go in peace. Stop chasing, stop threatening, stop clinging. Just, don't make this harder than it already is." The southern island turned out exactly as I'd hoped, warm, damp, gentle on the skin. That night, Anna finally relented. Selina and I left Manhattan before dawn, driving through the night, not stopping until we reached a small coastal town tucked away from everything. We checked into a quiet little inn, the kind that smelled faintly of salt and old pine wood. Life there was, peaceful. Almost dreamlike. During the day, we'd chat with the innkeeper, a kind older woman who treated us like family. With her blessing, Selina turned one of the spare rooms into a makeshift studio, sunlight poured through the windows, and the scent of oil paint began to fill the air again. Sometimes, we'd sit in silence and sketch. Other times, we'd laugh over nothing, brushstrokes dancing alongside each other. At night, we walked the beach. Selina especially loved the nighttime breeze. She'd walk beside me, sometimes hopping playfully along the path, stomping on my shadow like a child chasing fireflies. There was a lightness to her I'd never noticed before, a kind of magic that only revealed itself under moonlight. She trailed behind me, barefoot in the sand, radiant in her own quiet way, like a spirit spun from seafoam and stardust. And just like that, the days flew by. It had already been 2 weeks since we arrived. I found myself wondering, when did she start following so closely behind me like this? When did her presence become something I couldn't imagine going without? I remembered those first few days after we arrived, how hard it had been for her. She barely slept, waking up several times each night to check on me, always trying not to make a sound. I refused to go to a hospital, so she took it upon herself, knocking on doors across the island, visiting every local doctor she could find, digging through dusty medical books, researching strange herbal remedies. It was just a small bowl of medicine, only 100 milliliters, but she had to stay by its side for several hours. I told her more than once, it wasn't worth the trouble. All that effort, all that energy, for what? It wasn't like I ever intended to fight this thing. Besides, I hated those pitch-black herbal brews. The smell alone made me nauseous. A few times, I managed to pour them out when she wasn't looking, dumping the bitter liquid into the sink or out behind the garden when she stepped away. But eventually, Selina found out. One afternoon, I woke from a nap to find her sitting quietly outside my door, holding an empty bowl in her hands. Her eyes were red, swollen from crying. "George," she said softly, voice shaking, "I just want you to live a little longer." I had no idea how long she'd been sitting there, waiting for me to wake up. And hearing those words, so simple, so raw, hit me harder than anything else had in weeks. After that, no matter how bitter the medicine was, I drank it. Eyes closed, throat tight, I swallowed every drop without a word. I owed her too much. If her only wish was for me to stay alive a little longer, then maybe that was reason enough to keep trying. The sea breeze rolled in, salty, damp, brushing lightly across my face. Up ahead, Selina turned back and called to me, urging me to head home. She was chattering again, telling me about tomorrow's plan to take me out on an electric scooter to watch the sunset. She'd been talking with the innkeeper about new recipes she wanted me to try, and in a few days, she was going to cook something special just for me. And the most important update, she'd finally figured out how to fix the taste of that awful herbal brew. The new version was smoother, more palatable. I wouldn't have to suffer through it anymore. I chuckled and nodded, responding to each little update like I always did, patiently, fondly. But deep down, I knew it was time we had a real conversation. Because the truth was, she didn't get it. She was so damn sincere. So stubbornly kind. But what did I have left to give her now, besides a body falling apart, a future I couldn't promise, and a heart already tired from fighting? Nothing. Nothing at all. I wasn't wrong, my body was deteriorating faster than I'd expected. One night, the pain hit like a wave, sudden and unforgiving. Blood surged up my throat, and I doubled over, vomiting uncontrollably. Agony. It tore through every part of me, standing hurt, sitting hurt, lying down hurt. There was no escape, no relief, just an unrelenting ache that pulsed through every nerve. I fell off the bed, crashing to the floor. Everything went hazy, my vision swimming. But then I felt arms around me, warm, trembling. Selina. Her tears fell heavy and fast, splashing onto my face as she held me tight, voice breaking with panic. "George, you promised me you'd try my new recipe. You can't back out again, you hear me? You still owe me fireworks on New Year's Eve. And remember the innkeeper's son? His wedding's coming up soon, you said we'd go together, remember? You said we'd bring some good luck with us." I don't remember how that night ended. Everything after that was a blur. But when I finally opened my eyes again, Selina was right there, curled up beside my bed, looking utterly exhausted, her face pale from sleeplessness. "Selina. I'm sorry," I whispered, turning my head away. "I'm sorry I scared you again. I'm sorry I tried, and it still wasn't enough. I'm sorry. I might break another promise. Maybe I really won't be around to watch those fireworks after all. You should go," I said gently. "Don't waste any more time on me." I reached out and smoothed her hair, brushing a loose strand behind her ear. "You're a good girl, Selina. You deserve someone better, someone who can stay. These past few weeks, thank you, for everything. I left something for you," I added softly. 2 apartments in Manhattan, they're yours now. I already signed the deeds. You can settle the paperwork when you go back." It was all I had left to give. A poor attempt at compensation, maybe, but it was the only tangible part of me I could leave behind. Selina didn't say a word. She just sat beside me, silent and shaking, tears falling freely down her cheeks. Bathed in the warm glow of the bedside lamp, I let out a quiet sigh and finally spoke. "Selina, you can't keep anchoring yourself to the past. If anyone understood why she treated me this well, it was me. I knew. I'd always known. Years ago, in a narrow alleyway soaked in shadows, I found her. She was barely conscious, half-dressed, her clothes torn, her screams hoarse from crying, fighting, begging, while a group of strangers tried to drag her deeper into that darkness. By the time I reached her, there wasn't much left of her dignity. Just fear, bruises, and silence. That girl was Selena. The months that followed nearly destroyed her. She slipped into a deep depression so heavy it swallowed everything bright about her. The doctors later told me she was highly suicidal. At the time, we weren't close. I barely knew her beyond a few passing introductions, just that she was our professor's most promising student, the youngest in our department, wildly talented, full of potential. Everything I knew about her came from other people. They said she had a sweet tooth, always snuck snacks into class. That she liked to nap during lectures and drove our professor crazy. That she was loud, radiant, magnetic, the kind of person who lit up a room without even trying. But the girl I saw in that hospital bed was nothing like that. She was hollowed out. Maybe it was guilt, or pity, or something deeper I couldn't name, but I got involved. I started helping with her therapy. Sat through her sessions, listened to her silence, helped coax her back from the edge. I saw the worst of her, her most broken days, her ugliest pain. And I fought like hell to pull her back up. And slowly, piece by piece, she climbed out of that pit. But somewhere along the way, her need for support twisted into something else. Dependency. Attachment. And eventually, something more. Years passed, and she grew stronger. She rebuilt herself. Learned to face the scars of her youth without flinching. But still, Selena, beautiful and brilliant, with a future brighter than she realized, chose to stay in my shadow. Always a step behind me. Always reaching out to someone who could no longer offer her a future. She didn't have to live like that. She didn't have to tie herself to a man already fading. She deserved more than quiet loyalty and unspoken sacrifice. She didn't need to keep settling for less, just because I once pulled her from the dark. I asked her again, was it really worth it? Selena gave me a gentle smile. George, don't feel pressured. I just want to be here with you. The same way you were there for me, when I felt like life wasn't worth living. And like always, I couldn't argue with her. The days passed, quiet, simple, warm. On the winter solstice, the innkeeper pulled me aside at the front desk, lowering her voice like she was letting me in on some grand secret. George, she whispered, glancing around, have you gotten yourself into some kind of trouble lately? I blinked, confused. Trouble? She nodded and subtly gestured toward the front door. Out there, by that tree. There's been a car parked there every night, real late. Doesn't move, doesn't make a sound. Just sits there, always facing your window. My expression didn't change, but something inside me tightened. That night, the inn was lively and full of chatter. The innkeeper had invited neighbors over for a small celebration, and the whole place buzzed with warmth and laughter. But I noticed Selena seemed distracted. Her eyes kept drifting toward me, her expression flickering with something between concern and hesitation. Finally, after what felt like hours, she came over, reluctant, nervous, her voice soft. George, do you want to see her? Through the misted window, I looked out at the night. The village was lit up, each home glowing golden, full of life. And outside, alone under the dim streetlight, stood Anna. She wore a long black coat, her arms wrapped around herself, leaning against the car like she'd been waiting for hours. But what did that matter to me anymore? I turned away, letting the faint smile on my lips disappear. No, I said flatly. If she wants to stand there, let her. Don't worry about it. An unexplained irritation began to crawl under my skin as I sank deeper into the corner of the sofa. Memories had a way of clinging to you, even when you thought you'd let them go. And some, no matter how far you run, always find their way back. My mind began to drift. Unbidden, a memory from a winter solstice years ago came rushing back, when I was 23. Back then, things with my parents were strained. I wanted to marry Anna, and they didn't approve. That night, I'd sat alone in a tiny rental apartment, eating instant noodles straight from the cup, steam fogging up the cracked kitchen window. Anna had just been sent abroad by the Collins family. She called me, her voice soft, aching through the phone, George, I miss you so much. Neither of us wanted to hang up. We stayed on the line the entire night, speaking in whispers, breathing into the silence, refusing to let go. An ocean and a time zone apart, and still, the longing was unbearable. The next day, I told my parents I had a business trip in Paris and secretly boarded a flight to see her. We met in a snow-covered foreign city, wrapped in each other's arms, kissing beneath flickering street lamps, our breath tangled in the cold night air. "George, will you marry me?" she whispered, her lips brushing my ear, every word burning straight through to my chest. We got married overseas in record time, no hesitation, no doubts. Just two people who thought love was enough to last a lifetime. She was 17 when she confessed to me. 18 when we became official. 23 when we signed our marriage certificate. Now I was 28, and in just a few short years, everything had changed. I tried to keep my eyes from wandering toward the window. Tried to ignore her presence. Tried to remind myself she didn't matter anymore. But the truth was, Anna never needed to say a word to affect me. She just had to exist, and something inside me would always stir. A sharp, familiar pain twisted in my gut again, forcing me to close my eyes, to breathe through it, to drift into the void. I must have dozed off longer than I thought. I was jolted awake by the sound of Selina shouting, something I'd almost never heard before. She was always composed, always warm and gentle with everyone. Everyone, except Anna. From the window upstairs, I heard her voice ring out loud and clear from the front porch. "Get out. You've got some nerve showing up here. He doesn't want to see you. You're the last person he wants to see." When had Anna ever looked so desperate? Her voice trembled with pleading, stripped of all the pride she once wore like armor. "Selina, please. I'm begging you. Just let me see him. I've found the best specialists. I'll take him abroad. He'll get better, I swear, everything can still be okay." But Selina didn't even blink. Her face stayed cold, unreadable. "If he really wanted treatment, Anna, he wouldn't have left Manhattan," she snapped. "Besides, you know you need to find a doctor for him now, why didn't you do it before? George's body didn't fall apart overnight. Do you know how thin he was the first time I saw him after coming back? Did you ever notice how pale he's gotten, how often there's blood near the sink? Or were you just too blind to care?" She took a step closer, voice sharpening like a blade. "And now you show up with your crocodile tears and your grand promises? Please." Selina let out a short, bitter laugh. "Oh, Anna, now that you've finally had your fun, you come running back to play the savior? Who do you think you're fooling?" Anna staggered backward, visibly shaken. But she didn't leave. She stood there, head bowed, voice soft and broken. "You can say whatever you want about me, Selina, but George doesn't have time. We can't keep delaying this." When she realized Selina wasn't going to let her through, desperation cracked whatever composure she had left. Suddenly, she tilted her head back and screamed, voice raw and piercing, "George. George, please. Just let me see you." Selina's expression darkened instantly. She waved over a few of the staff, signaling for them to escort Anna out. This wasn't Manhattan. The reach of the Collins family didn't extend to this place, and Anna knew it. Two people grabbed her arms and began dragging her toward the gate. She kicked and struggled, trying to shake them off. "George. George, please, just come out. You said you'd never leave me. You said you'd never let go, have you forgotten everything?" Upstairs, I stood by the railing, listening to every word. And strangely, I felt nothing but a hollow laugh rising in my throat. So she remembers what I said. How touching. But did she remember it when she was out parading around with Henry? When she slipped away during Christmas, when she whispered to someone else the things she once said to me, did she remember those promises then? What a joke. What a goddamn joke. Where did she get the nerve to talk about loyalty now? Anna didn't leave. She stayed on the island, sending one expensive tonic after another to the inn, rare supplements, imported herbs, carefully packaged care boxes, as if she could buy redemption in bulk. I ignored them all. A few more days passed. Then came the wedding, the innkeeper's son was getting married, and the whole island was glowing with celebration. Streamers, flowers, music, laughter, it was the kind of joy that made you forget things, even if just for a moment. But on the way to the reception, I caught a glimpse of a familiar face in the crowd. Henry. He spotted me too and didn't hesitate, walked straight toward me, hands in his pockets, like we were old friends. "Got a minute?" he asked casually. I didn't even glance his way. "Spare me. You and Anna, both of you make me sick." Henry didn't flinch. He just stared at me, his expression unreadable, his eyes strangely conflicted. "She really does love you, you know," he said. "You probably don't even realize it, but the whole time you were gone, she was losing her mind. Calling doctors, chasing down specialists, pulling every string she could get her hands on to try and save you. You told her you didn't want treatment, and just like that, everything she did went to waste. And still, she never even got mad. His voice was quiet but intense, like he still couldn't understand it himself. She's been flying back and forth from Manhattan every single week, just to check if you're okay. Even when you wouldn't see her. Even when she stood outside like a fool, getting nothing in return, she didn't give up. George, he said, voice low now, what is it about you? What do you have that I don't? I didn't respond. He kept going anyway, like he was slipping into some private memory he couldn't escape. All these years, he said softly, the only reason I could stay close to her at all was because I studied you. I copied the way you spoke. The things you liked. Your habits. Your mannerisms. Because that was the only way she'd look at me twice. He gave a short laugh, one that didn't sound amused in the least. But the irony, George, the cruelest part of it all. His eyes met mine again, a glint of something bitter and broken underneath the smirk. She says she loves you. But she still slept with me. I didn't say a word. Didn't even blink. But he kept talking, like he needed to hear it out loud more than I needed to hear it at all. So you see, Henry's voice dropped, but his eyes turned feral. A flash of silver streaked through the air, a cold blade glinting just inches from my face. You have to die, George. It's the only way she'll ever see me. He's gone mad. That was my first thought. He's really going to kill me, in broad daylight, in front of everyone. George. A scream ripped through the air just as the blade came down. In the next second, everything spun. Anna had thrown herself in front of me. We crashed to the ground together, her body shielding mine. Henry stood frozen, staring at the blood now soaking his hands, Anna's blood. His laugh came next, empty, broken, chilling. You love him that much, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. Fine. Security came rushing in from all directions. But Henry was already too far gone. He grabbed a chair, wild-eyed and shaking. Then you can die together. No. Anna screamed and moved again, quicker than anyone could react. She covered me with her body, taking the second blow without hesitation. Warm blood spilled across my chest, blurring my vision, soaking into my clothes. As everything went dark, the last thing I heard was her faint voice, whispering near my ear. I'm glad. I'm glad you're okay. Anna spent the next 3 days in the ICU. Critical condition. Monitors beeping. Doctors issuing crisis reports like vending machines spitting tickets, one after another. During this period, Henry was taken away by the police for the crime of malicious injury. He will never be able to get out of jail in this life. Anna's older brother, Nate, flew in personally from Manhattan. He wanted to take her home. But Anna refused. She fought them. Screamed. Tore out her IVs. Refused food, refused water, refused to listen to anyone unless they let her see me. No one could calm her down. Eventually, Nate had no choice but to come find me himself. I was still in recovery, lying in my hospital bed, pale but conscious. When I saw him at the door, I didn't even flinch. Go home, I said flatly. I'm not going anywhere. Whatever happens to Anna, it's none of my concern anymore. I don't care. Nate was practically fuming, his voice rising with disbelief. What did you just say? I dare you, say it again. My sister ended up like this because of you, George. And you've got the nerve to act like you don't give a damn? Have you lost your conscience completely? What he didn't know was that his sister had crossed far more lines, done far more unforgivable things, than he could ever imagine. I didn't bother arguing. I didn't have the energy, or the interest. I just frowned and repeated myself, each word sharper than the last. I said it already, Anna's life or death has nothing to do with me. And I'd appreciate it if the entire Collins family got the hell out of my hospital room. George. A faint voice came from the doorway, barely audible, like a breeze. But I heard it. I turned my head. Anna stood there, pale and fragile, clinging to the doorframe to keep herself upright. The room fell into a heavy silence. Just the two of us now. You, Anna took a deep breath, her lips trembling. What you said just now. It's exactly what you heard, I said, turning my face away. Anna, don't you realize how much I despise you? Or do you need me to spell it out? You keep throwing yourself at me, it's pathetic. Yes, you got hurt. You took those wounds for me. So what? You want to stab me twice now to even the score? Her tears came instantly, rushing down her face like they'd been waiting behind her lashes for hours. George, please don't treat me like this, she whispered. She stepped closer, reaching out to hold me. I pushed her away. She tried again, another attempt at closeness, another push. Over and over, the same desperate cycle. And then I saw the red blooming through her bandages. The wound had split open again. Blood soaked into the white gauze, spreading like a slow, cruel reminder of everything broken between us. That was it. I snapped. Are you out of your goddamn mind? Is this what it takes for you, to bleed all over the floor just to get attention? Anna let out a breathless laugh, one so hollow it barely sounded human. If you won't forgive me, she said, voice shaking, then I really have no reason to go on living. She grabbed my hand and pressed it against her wound, forcing me to feel the warm, seeping blood. George, every day you've been gone, I've lived in nothing but regret and pain. Her voice cracked, her eyes wild with anguish. I don't even know how I lost my mind like that, how I let everything spiral. You were always the most important thing in my life, always. No one else ever came close, and still. I kept screwing it all up. I was stupid. Reckless. And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness anymore. But let me stay, just let me take care of you. I can't be away from you, George. Her expression twisted with agony, and her next words came out in a broken whisper. If I don't have you, I don't know how to live. I yanked my arm away, my face darkening with fury. Get out. I couldn't take her madness anymore, couldn't stand the sight of her unraveling like this. Anna's body went rigid, then shook slightly, caught somewhere between desperation and delusion. You're still mad at me, aren't you? She whispered, nodding to herself like trying to convince both of us. Of course you are. You're still angry. And then, completely unhinged, she shoved a fruit knife into my hands. Then do it, she shouted. If that's what it takes, stab me. Cut me. Hurt me if it'll make you feel better. Just don't push me away, please, George, please. I just want to take care of you. I just want to stay. Please, please don't do this to me. She collapsed into sobs again, heartbreaking, uncontrollable. Her head dropped against my shoulder, her body trembling as she clung to me like I was her last lifeline. She wants a chance. Fine. I forced down the revulsion crawling up my throat and looked her dead in the eye. You want a chance? I said coldly. Then let's start counting. Do you remember our 3rd year of marriage? You start not going home anymore. Remember the night before Valentine's Day? I said, my voice low, steady. You finally came home, for once. And all you had to say to me was, can you stop being like this, George? You're such a bore. You act like you're already dying. Then, you took Henry on a business trip to Paris. Romantic, wasn't it? And on Christmas, while I was home, sick as hell with the flu, calling you over and over just hoping you'd come back and sit with me, you were off God knows where. My eyes burned dry, the kind of ache that went bone deep. I slowly peeled her fingers from my arm, one by one. So tell me, Anna, where do you get the nerve to ask for another chance? You want the truth? I asked, a cruel smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. I feel sick just looking at you. I can't breathe when you're in the room. My whole body tenses up like it's trying to reject you. If you dropped dead in front of me right now, I'd step over your body without blinking. I turned and walked out without another word. In the corner of my eye, I saw her collapse, knees buckling, hunched over, gasping for breath like the weight of everything had finally crushed her. After that day, Anna vanished from my life completely. No more calls. No more visits. No more gifts sent to the inn. Selena and I fell back into our quiet rhythm again, like we had when we first arrived on the island. Peaceful, easy, almost like nothing had ever happened. But peace never lasts forever. The cancer spread faster than anyone expected. Oddly enough, the violent bouts of blood coughing became less frequent. But something worse took their place, an overwhelming, constant exhaustion. It didn't matter where I was or what I was doing, sleep would hit me like a wave, sudden and unstoppable. Sometimes, I'd be in the middle of a conversation with Selena, listening to her tell a story, laugh about something mundane, and then I'd feel it creeping in. That heavy pull behind my eyes. The blur of her voice fading into a fog I couldn't fight. At first, I'd wake and ask her how long I'd been out. But as the stretches grew longer, and the look on her face more strained, I stopped asking. Some truths are easier left unspoken. On Christmas Day, Selena bundled me up carefully, layer after layer, wrapping me like I was made of glass. Under the flickering fireworks, she closed her eyes and made a wish. "I hope you'll be safe in the new year," she whispered. I tried to look at her, really look at her, as she said it. But I could feel it now, clearer than ever. My strength was disappearing by the second. My body had become nothing more than a fragile shell barely holding itself together. It hurt, God, it hurt. Even lifting my hand just a little sent pain shooting through every joint, every nerve ending. But I pushed past it, pulled her into a slow, trembling hug. This was it. I could feel it. I wouldn't get another chance. "Selena," I said softly, breath shallow, voice barely there, "I'm sorry." I fumbled, struggling to lift my fingers, gently brushing the tears from the corner of her eye. "If there's a next life, I hope we meet sooner. And this time, I promise, I'll be the one chasing after you." Her shoulders shook as the tears came harder, unstoppable. Fireworks boomed in the distance, lighting the sky in streaks of gold and red. "Selena," I said again, my voice growing fainter, "I want your soup, just one more time. Will you make it for me again?" My eyes were starting to lose focus. The world was blurring at the edges, drifting further and further away. She gripped my shoulders tighter, her voice breaking. "No, no, George, please don't sleep. Stay with me. Look at me. Just look at me." But I couldn't. Everything was slipping through my fingers. And in the last hazy seconds, I had only one final thought. This winter feels endless. But at least I made it to New Year's with her. This time, I kept my promise.
My sister lost her mind. All for a man who was already dead. That Christmas, Manhattan was hit by the heaviest snowfall in nearly 3 years. Flights were grounded. Trains shut down. The entire city stalled under thick, blinding white. And in the middle of that brutal storm, my sister got a phone call, and without saying a word, drove herself all the way to some small southern island. I knew where she was going. Back to the man she called the love of her life. But this time, she stayed longer than usual. Over 2 months. No calls. No texts. No responses. She'd vanished completely. I had no choice, I had to go after her myself. In the end, it wasn't hard to find her. I showed up at the same seaside inn where George had lived, and there she was. The moment I opened the door, I could hardly believe the woman slumped on the floor was my sister. She was unrecognizable, thin to the point of ghostly, eyes sunken, hair tangled. Cigarette butts littered the floor. Beer bottles rolled into corners. And in the center of it all, a small, polished urn. I had no idea how long she'd gone without food. I dragged her to the hospital. She didn't fight me, not really. Within a week, she landed in the ICU. Twice. When she finally came to, she just stared at the ceiling. Didn't speak. Didn't eat. Didn't drink. Whatever patience I had left snapped. I stood over her, yelling, fists clenched. "Anna, what the hell are you doing? You're not a kid. What are you trying to prove with all this? You think dying slowly makes you a tragic heroine?" It was a long time before she said anything. Her voice was so quiet, it barely made it past her lips. "Nate, he's gone. I didn't see him at the end. He didn't want me, not even for his final goodbye." I'll never forget the way she looked when she said it. There was nothing in her eyes. Not grief. Not tears. Just a void, dark and bottomless. A kind of despair that even death would envy. She looked like someone who had already stopped living. The year after George died, my sister slowly started to resemble a normal person again. She reconnected with friends. Went back to work. Smiled more. Laughed sometimes. Everything seemed to be moving in the right direction. She hadn't mentioned George in a long time. She no longer clung to the fragments of the past like they were the only things keeping her breathing. I thought she was finally healing. But I was wrong. One day, by accident, I saw the scars, crisscross lines on her arms, old and new, carved deep into her skin like secrets trying to surface. That was the first time I ever struck her. Slapped her straight across the face. I didn't recognize the person standing in front of me. When had my sister become this obsessive, this broken? She'd fooled us all. I asked her why she was doing this to herself. Tears welled in her eyes, and she whispered, "Nate. I miss him. No matter how much I drink, I can't even dream about him anymore. I don't know what else to do. I really don't. That was the first time I realized things had spiraled far beyond my reach. I leaned against the wall, exhausted, and asked her flatly, if you loved George so much, if he meant that much to you, then what the hell were you doing all those years with other men? I didn't say it to be cruel. I said it because I truly didn't understand. Why is it that people never cherish someone when they're alive? But once they're gone, suddenly everything becomes sacred, everything becomes regret. She heard me. And without a word, she doubled over and vomited blood. Then she started laughing. Sitting on the floor, laughing uncontrollably, almost manically. And then came the sobbing, deep, guttural, soul-cracking sobs as she called George's name over and over again. It was suffocating to witness. Like watching someone unravel cell by cell. It wasn't long after that, near the end of the second year, when she overdosed. Sleeping pills. And honestly, I wasn't surprised. She hadn't really been alive since the day George died. She just kept breathing. Afterward, I found her room filled with pills, and nearly 2,000 letters, handwritten and carefully dated. I opened them one by one. All of them were apology letters. Confessions. Regrets. Each one addressed to George. I burned them all. Maybe he'd see them, wherever he was. And maybe, just maybe, he'd forgive her. Though, honestly, I'm not sure she ever forgave herself.